Chris is a person in the industry that when they speak, everybody should listen. Please sit back and take in this next talk. Chris's talk, Everything Connected, will explore exciting opportunities ahead for designers working in a connected culture. Please enjoy the talk.
I'm on Twitter, I'm Failer, but nobody uses Twitter anymore because Nazis, right? I am definitely going to swear. So if you're easily offended, you should probably leave now. It's just because I'm passionate about things, right? My talk is about things that are connected, separate things that are connected together, but it's also about the connections that run through your career. So I'm going to talk about 3 projects, Falt, Glyph, and C-Sense, that happened at different points in my career. And even though this happened about maybe 20 years ago, I'm still learning stuff from that I'm using in my work. I have a problem. You could call it an addiction. My dad bought me an Apple II computer back in the 70s. It wasn't a real Apple II computer. He worked for the police in Hong Kong, and it was a fake Apple II computer. But it was an Apple II computer, and it had like that color logo on it and everything, but it wasn't a real one. But that sort of started a lifelong addiction, not so much to the social aspect, the social media aspect of technology, but to stuff, right? That led to this. I don't know about you, but hands up if you use your laptop all the time like it's your life. And if you lost it, you would be devastated, right? That then led to this, right? And this thing here, this is the Plus one, right? The iPhone XS Plus. It's like the most incredible thing that's in your pocket, right? Then this, right? I had to buy one of these because, like, how can you design for something if you don't actually own the device? And the last one, I managed to persuade the university that they should buy this for me for what I call research purposes. And I had a lengthy conversation with the accountant about that. He thought I was taking the piss, but I was like, no, this is actually for work. Did anyone see this? Anyone remember this, the little printer? It was a really nice little connected printer. I'm going to talk about that more later. I bought one of those because, like, why not? Because it's awesome. I had to buy one of these. This thing here, we're constantly, has anyone got one of those? Hands up if you've got a device like this. And do you go like this? Stop, Alexa, stop. Because it starts talking to you in the middle of something. Because you said, Alex is really struggling with his, and then it's like trying to tell you about the struggling or something. Does anyone know this? It's like a little pin that you wear and it's connected to your phone and you can then beam badges onto it. It's like really awesome. The screen is a bit shit, it's very dark, but I had to buy that, obviously, because, like, problem, yeah? Do you know these? Like, I had to buy this because effectively they were paying me money to buy that. They were, pay £2 and get £5. And so I said to Cara, my wife, like, I have to buy this. And she was like, what the hell do you need this for? And I was like, for ordering coffee. And I was like, but it's not costing me any money. It's actually, they're giving me £3 to buy this, right? Which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't want you to think that I'm like this. dollar bill, I'm sitting on beds of money and I have tons of cash because I don't. I particularly like this guy here. That guy, he's kind of doing that with the money on his head. That's like a good exercise regime, I think, right? Because I buy all this stuff for research purposes. So I've got all of these technological things in my life, and I don't know about you, but hands up if this burgeoning landscape of stuff that we have to design for really scares you to shit. Totally scares me to shit. I think, oh God, what? We've got to design this thing now? It's an absolute nightmare. So you could look at it as being like, this is horrendous, we've got to learn all this stuff. Or you could look at it as the opportunities ahead are super exciting if we choose to embrace them. And I prefer to look at it that way. Plus, it gives me an excuse to buy all this stuff for research purposes. So what I'm going to cover, the beginner's mind, short beginning and outro, and then 3 stories in the middle that are about things I've designed that I think we can learn from, or things that I've learned from, certainly. The Beginner's Mind, stories resonate, that's the record label I used to run. Ecosystems are not necessarily just for Twitter or Instagram. I've just noticed a spelling mistake on my slides, not a spelling mistake. When we get to this section, it's not going to be called ecosystems do not equal Twitter, it's going to be called Instagram, right? So don't go into a tailspin there, but I'm going into a tailspin because I'm like, fuck, I've been looking at these slides for days and I haven't spotted that, right? And then I'm going to talk about endless magical connections, finally, opportunities, ahoy, right? The beginner's mind, you're always changing as a person. So the stuff you know now will be different to the stuff you knew yesterday or last week or the month before. So you can always approach any new thing, new challenge with your new set of knowledge and approach it in a different way. And you can choose to approach things with a beginner's mind or with a degree of cynicism. Oh, I already know all this stuff already, right? And I'm a big fan of the beginner's mind because you're never not a student. I teach at Belfast School of Art half-time and then I work the rest of the time. Well, that makes it sound like I don't do any work. Sorry, Richard. The people who are doing the teaching are doing really hard work. It's the truth, right? Has anyone heard of this concept, Shoshin? I'm probably really brutally destroying that. It's a word from Zen Buddhism, which means the beginner's mind, and it refers to having an attitude of openness, eagerness, and a lack of preconceptions when studying a subject. So even when studying at an advanced level, you're really good at something. You approach the task at hand just as a beginner would. So in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. And in the expert's mind, there are few. So don't approach anything as an expert per se. Try and approach it as a beginner would, and you'll find that you learn a lot. Throw yourself in. I'm going to talk about 3 projects where I threw myself in and learned as I worked through each project. The final piece of advice, well, it's not the final piece of advice, the final piece of advice for this section, right? I'm done, thank you. Is say yes and shit your pants later. I've done this for lots of projects. People have said to me, would you like to run a big sound installation with artists from all over the world? And just my face and my brain and all this bits is just going, yes. And then they're going, great, shake on it. And then you're going, how much? And they're like, 25 grand. And I'm like, okay, great, good. There's 25 grand that is appealing. And then I leave and I think, shit, what have I just signed myself up for? But then you've got to go off and learn all that stuff, which is great, right? And you're going to learn it. That's not a problem. So the first project that I want to talk about, I say project, but it was a business, is focused around stories, because I think that stories resonate. This is from the 90s, and I'm still using stories today. And I think life is more interesting when we fill it with stories. So in the 90s, I worked for a design agency. I was a senior designer for a small design agency in Belfast, and I was working for people like the Royal Mail. So I don't know if you know stamps. You put them on letters. Probably you guys are just using email, but you can put these little bits of stuff onto like a physical envelope and put it through the post. It's amazing. I designed the stamps for Northern Ireland, which was a challenging project in and of itself because like Protestants, Catholics, these people hate these people, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing work for Queen's University. I'd done some stuff for Absolute Vodka. I was doing stuff for the BBC. And it's not like, I don't want to sound like I'm being ungrateful, but a lot of it was client work and it was a bit boring. And lots of clients didn't really have the vision that you have. And I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you have this amazing vision for what this thing might be. And then the client's like, oh no, that's a bit risky and they don't want to do it. Well, I had found myself in this point. And luckily for me, I found £500, which I could use for excitement. There was a building society, I think it was the Halifax, and it was going to become a bank. And so to bribe all of the people who were in the Halifax to let it become this bank thing, they gave everyone £500. And I got £500 and Cara got £500. And we sat down, we chatted about it and said, will we put this towards our mortgage or should we just use this free money for something fun? And we decided, yes, just use the free money for something fun. At the time, I was working 5 days a week for this design agency. And I went to my boss, Rodney, and it was in the days before mobile phones. So my studio mates were like, Chris, you are totally going to get the sack here. Cara thought I was going to get the sack. I went into Rodney's office, waded through the smoke, because you could smoke in the building in those days. And he said, what's up? And I said, I'm so frustrated with working for some of these clients. It's a bit boring. And what I would like to do is I would like to work 4 days a week for you and 1 day a week for myself. And he said, okay, tell me more about what you want to do. I said, I want to set up a record label. And he said, okay, how are you going to do it? I talked to him about £500. And he said, how do you see this working? And I said, how I see this working, because I'm thinking, this is going well. I haven't actually just been summarily dismissed, right, and sacked. I said, how do I see this working is I take a 20% pay cut. And I work Monday to Thursday for you, and then on the Friday, because you're only paying me 80% of the money, I just do my own stuff. And he said, how does this sound? He said, I pay you for 5 days. You, on a Friday, work on your record label, and I pay you to do that work, and then you just don't tell anyone in the studio. I was thinking, like, what the fuck? This is going really well. I came back out of the office and I said to the people, they were like, do you still have a job? And I said, I do, and I'm paid 80% of the money, and now on a Friday I'm going to run a record label. They were like, bloody hell, they couldn't believe I hadn't been sacked. So I had a day a week just to do whatever I wanted. It was awesome. So I set up this record label called Falt, and I had all these artists who were working on the label. That's these people at the top here. And all of these people were all imaginary. I just made them all up, right? Because I thought if we have a record label, you know, we don't want to just launch with nobody. We want to launch with some people. And so I then wrote reviews of the music, right? This guy here called Udegawa something something. I Googled that to find out where I got those names from. It is actually a street in Japan. I had this partner called Conrad. He was a stock photography person, so this was just a stock photography image. And he eventually became a real person, but there's no way I can fit that into this talk because we don't have the time. So Conrad eventually became a real person, but at the beginning he was just imaginary. And when I went and did talks about this stuff, I would start the talk by saying, Conrad can't make it today because he's old and he's frail. But he did want to give you this message, and then I would play something like this.
Très chers amis, pardonnez-moi de n'être présent ce soir que par la pensée et par la voix, quelques ennuis de santé, comme on en rencontre à mon âge, m'ayant retenu dans mon vieil ermitage d'Horta.
So he was in an ermitage d'Horta, which he was like in a convalescence home. And I wrote the script in English. I got a friend who was a translator to translate into French. I paid a voice actor, because you can pay people to have good voices to do this stuff, to read this stuff out. So I paid a French voice actor to do this stuff. And then I would play that at the beginnings of talks, like this, but not to this kind of audience, more to the music side of things. And he was just he just existed in my imagination, right? But the story was like really kind of like fascinating. I used my skills as a designer to make these record covers. And then I just had a lot of fun. We would, every day at this office, I don't know how much work we got done in the studio. We would at lunchtime go to Katie Daly's, which was our pub just 2 doors down. We would have a few pints. We would think of crazy things we could do. And then I would design these record covers with crazy track titles like this, like, you know, I don't even know what that is. It's like science or something. And then we would say, this is an edition of 100 copies. And it didn't exist at all. And then I would write reviews of this record. I would describe it, and then I would write a record review. And this one was written by a guy called Franz Stengel. So I would just look on the web and see names I thought sounded cool, like Franz. I thought Franz sounded pretty cool. There was somebody else called Stengel. I thought he sounded pretty cool. And then I thought, well, he could be writing for a magazine called 1024. I thought that sounded pretty cool because it was like a floppy disk, right? And it was all just made up. It was all just in my mind. But these are all CDs that we released, right? So the blue one that looks like a normal CD, that was our first release. But to the people of the world, that was our 11th release. And so I contacted magazines like The Wire magazine and Resonator and Fader in Japan. And I contacted all these different magazines. And so The Wire, if anyone is into music, experimental music, The Wire is a big magazine. I contacted Rob Young, who was the editor, and I said, you know, we've been hesitant in getting in touch with you, but, you know, we would like to send you one of our CDs. And he was like, what? I've never even seen this label before. And then I would talk to other friends who were my idols in the music industry, and I would say, you know, I love the work work you're doing. I don't know if you know about our label. We've been running for about 10 years. It was all just a lie. And they were like, oh, God, how did we not see this? And then anyone, if they were in Europe, I would say we're really big in Japan. If they were in Japan, I'd say we're very focused around Europe, sort of Amsterdam direction, right? So I would just tell people that we were big somewhere else, right? And then it sort of became real. These CDs became real. And I ran that business until iTunes came along, and iTunes killed it. And I'm tempted to run a record label again because cassettes and vinyl, you know. But it was all just stories. So before we get to the lessons, here's one big lesson. There are no rules, okay? Don't ever let anyone convince you that there are rules, because rules are constructs. All rules are things that we have decided are rules, right? So you can break rules once you know what the rules are, okay? So don't let anyone tell you, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that, because you can do whatever you want, including having a fictitious partner who speaks French. So, stories matter. Content also can take many forms. One of the things that was interesting for me and what I wanted to do with the label was, you know, there were a lot of record labels at the time who were thinking, well, we could sell our CDs via the web. I was thinking, well, there's this new thing called an MP3, which to us is commonplace, but at the time was relatively new. And I was thinking we could use these MP3 files and we could give stuff away for free. And then we could sell physical releases, we could sell digital releases. We didn't actually sell digital releases, we just gave everything away. My bank manager found this very hard to fathom. We released the first blue CD that I showed you, which sold out straight away and got reviews in the wire and everything. It was great. You know, so the strategy of just making up a whole bunch of stories had kind of worked. And then after we finished that single CD, we decided we would do a 24 CD box set, which I took a 16 grand loan from the bank. Bank manager came to my house. Has anyone seen the film Good Vibrations? Good Vibrations? Who said yes? Terry Hooley. There's a scene with Terry Hooley, and I actually met Terry in Belfast, a really interesting guy. There's a scene in Good Vibrations where Terry Hooley puts his house up against the label, and his wife doesn't know. I did exactly the same thing before I even knew who Terry Hooley was. The bank manager came to the house. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do a 24 CD box set. And he said, well, tell me about the rest of the business. I said, we've just done this one CD. I didn't tell him all the lies stuff because I thought that would be a bit too bonkers for a bank manager. And he said, where's all the money then? Where's all the money not in your bank account? And I said, I have an answer for that. I took him to a different bit of the house. I opened a cupboard and there was a thing called a Tomy drum machine. It was like a kid's drum machine that was amazing, that was selling out, and they decided not to make it anymore. I phoned all my friends and said, if you see these Tomy drum machines, I have a drum machine project. It's like little tiny kid's toy. And I opened the cupboard and we had like hundreds of these things, which I was sending to artists, musicians to make music with. And he was like, what the fuck? And he said, what? He couldn't really get it. And I said, we're going to release the box set and we're going to give everything away for free on the internet. It's all going to be free to download as MP3s. This is way before the iPod was a thing. And he was like, but if you can get the MP3s for free, like, why would anybody buy the box set? And I said, because people love packaging and they'll spend the money on the packaging. And there was a fallow period just after iTunes launched where that wouldn't have worked, but you could do that again now, I think, because people have started to value physical stuff. And we got the money. I told him he said, what are you going to do if you don't sell? And I said, you could have my house. And he said, okay, fair enough, I sign right here. So I signed. And then after we sold all the CDs, I then went and told Cara, by the way, I used the house as collateral for that loan. She was not wildly happy, but we had made a profit, which was great. Learn the rules, break the rules. Think about digital, think about physical, because we're now coming back into a world where physical stuff wasn't cool for a while. We were all, remember the paperless office? Remember that? We were going to live in a paperless office. Bullshit. We've got tons of paper still, right? So think about where these stories end up. Think about the medium in which you deliver them. This is the slide that's really causing me quite a lot of pain on this stage, because the earlier one said ecosystems do not equal Twitter. I took Twitter out because Twitter, a love-hate relationship with Twitter. You don't need to be $1 billion company to join the dots. So an ecosystem is well, in one sense, it's a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. In another sense, it's like a complex network of interconnected systems, right? And what's that got to do with us? I, last summer, spent most of my summer working on a connected product with a company called C-Sense. Anybody know C-Sense? Cycling light company. Really interesting. They have this light, which looks like that there. And they had an app which went with the light, but the app was not as good as it could have been. And they asked me to come along and to help them to develop the idea for the app. The problem was that their previous app, the current one's called Ace, and the previous one was called, I think it was called Icon. They were so fixated, because they were all physical product designers, they were so fixated on the physical product design of the light that the app itself was a bit shit. And I kind of came in and said, look, we could think about this part of the equation, because the app part of the equation isn't great. And when we did the user research, everyone said, oh, I don't use the app. And when I said, why don't you use the app? They said, because it's terrible. It doesn't really work. The design's awful. It's not got a great user experience. I just don't use it. So I persuaded this company that the light on its own was just a light, but the light plus the app was like this supercharged light because it was connected. So 1 + 1 is more than the sum of its parts. So I mapped everything out on paper. What data does the device collect? It's a light, and it's taking GPS, it's doing speed, it's doing road surface conditions, doing lots of interesting stuff. And then I started to ask questions about what would a typical human want to see? Like an owner of the light will want to see a certain amount of data, but what will organizations want to see? So a human might want to turn the light on and off, adjust the patterns of the flashing of the light, collect some fitness data, maybe like how far they've ridden. Perhaps we could infer some calorific burn and stuff like that. They might want to track their rides using the GPS side of things. They might want to be able to keep a track of all of their rides. We also started to think about things like, if you're a hardcore cyclist, which I am definitely not, you have a collection of all your bikes, and you could put this into the app. But we also thought about organizations like city councils. They would want to know things like surface conditions or traffic flows or where there are points of congestion. And then we started to map all of this out on paper as to, we can collect this data, but we don't need to show everybody everything. Or if we do show it to them, we're showing it to them more as a kind of like an interesting piece of data. Paper first, every time. Okay, most of my work is on paper. This is the heart and soul of my life, my laptop, but the heart and soul of my life 100% is Sharpies and big sheets of paper. So without the app, the product I felt was less than it could be. So we would keep a track of your week. You could see, for example, that you had cycled on Monday and Tuesday, you hadn't cycled on Wednesday. Today is Thursday, and we've definitely cycled today, and that's why that dot's a bit bigger. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, unless you're Doctor Who, you're not capable of doing that because that's in the future, right? And then we kept a track of data like your light's journey or the roughness of the road and all of that kind of stuff, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. It was interesting to show the users because they felt like they were part of a greater good. They felt like they were contributing to reducing CO2 levels. They felt like they were helping councils to understand the need for cycle lanes. They were also contributing to the greater good, really. So hardware plus software equals Gestalt. And the lessons I learned from that were look for the connections. We can have this thing, and it works as a light, but if we could add an app that connects to it by Bluetooth and does other stuff, we can do interesting things. Also, ecosystems, this kind of idea of everything being connected, are not just for Instagram. They're not just for giant companies. C-Sense is a company with about 18 to 20 people in it. It's not that big. It's certainly not the size of Instagram. But what they had was a vision. And picking up on the workshop talk this morning, which I thought was really interesting, because the workshop, prepare for the workshop, then do the workshop, then follow through. I run a lot of workshops, so I really enjoyed that talk. The follow through part is the part for me where I get most of my work. We got them into the studio, we did a bunch of work with them as a team for a day. They then started to make connections across the different parts of the company. Marketing started talking to the product people, who started talking to the strategy people. And then the important thing after that was I wrote up a summary of all the stuff that we'd come up with and then proposed to them, here are some things that we could build. And they had the vision, I think, to take the jump and to do something. Ask yourself, how big can it be? So the third project I want to talk about is the little printer, Endless Magical Connections. Designing connected products is challenging, but it's fun. So we have software and we have hardware, and at the intersection of the two, we have opportunity. I have always been somebody who is a software person, more the design side of the software and how user journeys and customer flows and that kind of thing, as opposed to building the stuff. But for me, the hardware part looked kind of interesting. Did you see the star there? I'm just going to go back so you can see that star, because I spent quite a long time on it. It's, one second, it starts up here, right up there, and it'll come down to here and then it'll go like that, right? So, there we go. That took me probably about 10 minutes, so it's time well spent, right? The hardware part for me was like fear, right? It's like all this new stuff and how are we going to do this, and oh, what a nightmare, right? I saw this on the internet, the little printer, and if you don't know it, this printer is connected to a little thing that's connected to your router, which is connected to an app on your phone, and you can sign up for little publications, which are little, essentially receipts, till roll receipts. And so you can sign up for little publications, and then you'll come home and the little white bit at the top will be glowing like this, and then when you hit the black button, out will come like a little newspaper almost. I looked at this and thought, I need this in my life. I said to Cara, I want to buy this, and she was like, how much is it? And it was 250 quid or 300 quid, and she was like, what are you gonna use it for? And I was like, I have no idea, but look at it. I'm like, come on. She's like, no. She insisted it was a no. I did what any self-respecting designer would do. She went to bed. I said, I'll see you in about 5 minutes. I went into the studio and I started designing a typography publication for this thing. I came to bed about 5 o'clock, about 7 hours later, and I'd made all these visuals. I tweeted it. I contacted a few friends like Tim Brown at Adobe Typekit, Elliot J. Stocks, who was doing 8 Faces, and a few kind of famous internet people, and said, what do you think of this? What do you think? Do you think this could be a thing for that little printer? And yeah, they were all like, that's great. I was walking across the town and the next day to work, and I got this message from this lady called Denise. And she was like, I love your thing, it's really nice. And I was like, thank you. I'm thinking, who is Denise? I have no idea. When I got into the art college, I opened up the internet. Well, open up the internet? I actually went right into the bowels of the internet, and I turned on the internet, and I Googled this person. She was a creative director at Berg. So she was making this little printer. And I was like, holy shit. Then I realized she was following me on Twitter, and then I was immediately following her back. I DM'd her and said like, oh, what? Thank you so much. Like, I mean, earlier I was just like, thank you, but now I'm like, mind blown, thank you. Because like now I can persuade Cara I need one of these things. So I went home, I said to Cara, Denise, she works for Berg, I need to buy this thing. She was like, okay. So I was able to buy this thing for 250 quid. I thought I'm gonna design this little typography newsletter, how hard can it be? I downloaded the publisher's handbook, the little printer publisher's handbook. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, this is looking okay, right? And I started to read this stuff. And I was like, okay, right, there's some stuff going on here, maybe JSON or something. I have no idea what I'm doing on the internet. I'm amazed I'm even standing on the stage, frankly. And I was like, what the fuck? I have no idea how to do this, right? So don't be the smartest person in the room. If you're in a room and you're the smartest person in the room, leave that room, go find another room and find some people who are smarter than you and learn from those people. Ask others who know more than you do for help. T-shaped people, has anyone heard of Tim Brown? Not the Tim Brown at Typekit, it's the Tim Brown at IDEO. He has this idea of T-shaped people. These are people who are really good at what they do, but they have an understanding of other aspects of different industries. They're able to talk enough to the other people to be able to talk in sort of common sense language about what they do, but they're really good at one thing. I found a friend of mine, Chris Shiflett, who was really, he looked at that stuff and he was like, oh yeah, I know what I do here, and he just started doing this and making things happen. And I was like, that's amazing. And then suddenly this little printer thing that I had designed was in a browser mock-up version of the application. And I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. And he was looking at what I was doing, which was like selecting typefaces and writing little tiny stories about the typefaces, and a very simple web page, which was super, super basic. And he was looking at it and going, that I couldn't do what you're doing. These little descriptions are really interesting. You know, who knew that Futura was the typeface that's on the plaque that went to the moon and all this kind of stuff. And I was looking at what he was doing, and I was like, bloody hell, what you're doing just blows my mind. And And so then we were able to create this publication called Glyph, which is a tiny typographic tome that came out of your printer once a week. And sadly, the printer story, it died. It lasted for about a year, and then there was no business market for it. And it's now just a hunk of plastic and metal and till roll in my studio. But while it was running, it was awesome because you could get this thing out of your, you could hit a button and a piece of paper would come out with stuff that you had signed up to on an app. It was, for me, it was mind-blowing. So some lessons. T-shape for the win, right? I used to think that FTW stood for fuck the what. And then my studio mates were like, no, Chris, it's for the win. And I was like, okay. I thought all these people were saying fuck the what? Like they were like putting what the fuck back to front or something? And right. So I told you I have no idea what I'm doing on the internet, right? Find smart people, work with those people. If you have an idea, make that idea. Opportunities ahoy. This is me wrapping up here. It's such an exciting time to be working as a designer. It's such an exciting time. This is science fiction, right? Has anyone seen the film Her? So awesome. He falls in love with the operating system that's in his ear. And he's got this thing in his ear, and it's connected to his, it's like a phone type thing that he carries in his pocket, and he talks to. It's like Siri. It'd be like falling in love with Siri. That's science fiction, right? But here is science fact, right? These are not a million miles removed from the thing that is in Siri. Obviously, the level of AI-ness of the thing in She is a little bit more advanced than, say, Siri. Well, anything is a bit more advanced than Siri. I think we could agree on that. But AirPods, I mean, this is like the future in our hands right now. And I definitely feel like I need to buy a pair of these for research purposes. So, the future is so, so exciting. Say yes. These are my closing thoughts, right? Say yes. If someone says, do you want to do this, or would you like to get involved in this project? I would say, maybe you don't have the skills. Just say yes. You'll learn those skills later. Embrace all of these amazing opportunities to learn. You can learn on the web, right? You don't even really need to go to a university anymore. Although if you're studying with Richard Eskins, please do not leave his course. It's good. Darren, Richard, I'm there, okay? Use every second, right? Don't waste time. Screen time. Anyone know screen time, right? I looked at this and I was like, what the fuck? I'm spending 3.5 hours a week on Twitter. That is not a good thing, right? I could use 3.5 hours a week on Twitter to learn some other things. So you might be telling me that you don't have any time, but we do have a lot of time that we sort of let slip through our fingers. So, in closing, ask yourself, what will you learn? What will you create? The time to create amazing things is now. Go forth and make awesome. Thank you. Good job.
That was entertaining.
Hopefully it was educational as well.
And educational, obviously. One quick question. Rick's going to kill me, but it's fine. Let's just work this out. Established career.
What's that?
Established career.
Established
Done many
career.
things. What is the one most important thing that you've learned throughout your time?
Well, I've been working for 25 years, and I think that the one most important thing I've learned is kind of what's in the talk. It's to say yes. And, we were looking for a user researcher for a big project we were working on for EA, the gaming company. And we couldn't find somebody, this is a while back, we couldn't find somebody for that project. We looked and looked and looked. So user researcher people, I mean, they're like hen's teeth, right? So I signed up to a bunch of workshops, said, I'm going to teach myself this stuff, and then we'll be a better studio. There's so much. You do not have to sign up to a workshop and pay for it. You could just do it all on the internet, right? You could learn everything. Just turn on the internet, basically. Learn, always learn is the thing. There's that takeaway, key takeaway. Always be learning.
Next slide.
Next slide. MrMurphy.com. Go and take a look at MrMurphy.com. It's like fully responsive and highly performant. If you've taken a look at it, it's like raw HTML and a tiny bit of CSS. It's a work in progress because I am so busy. But I am running the London Marathon. Look at this fine body here. Look at it, right? I'm running the London Marathon to raise money for Rethink Mental Illness. Mental illness and technology is huge, and it's a topic that's really close to my heart. And Gavin and the team very kindly said I could put that up there. That takes you directly to my sponsorship page. £1. If everyone here gave £1, we would do some really awesome work for mental illness.
Thank you. Big round of applause for Chris.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Right, need to swap over.